And welcome to Forever Red Devils. It is Tuesday morning and plenty of news to come. Today in the show, we're going to be talking about an early exit for one of Ten Hag's latest recruitments, and a bit of an embarrassing one if it is. And that is Joshua Zirkzee. We'll be talking a little bit about Dimitar Berbatov and what he had to say about Erasmus Højlund. We're going to be talking about Joe Huchel, who's also made quite a cool bit of a bold statement, as well as looking at the week ahead and the fact that United will be back in action in 2 days' time, and not expecting too much injury news updates, but have to rotate slightly because of replacements, bans, and the likes. So lots to get through in the show today. If you're new, please do smash the like on the video. Please do subscribe to the channel as well. And let me know what you think about this whole Zirkzee situation, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But in general, let me know what you think is happening with him at Old Trafford. Right, let's start with the Zirkzee news, shall we, which is the big story of the day. So, reports are saying that Joshua Zirkzee is apparently looking for an early exit from Old Trafford just a few months after signing for Erik ten Hag. Apparently, Italy is the destination that he wants to go. He wants to go back to Italy because he thinks he's not settled in as he would have liked. And to be fair, we're not seeing really the goal tally and the return that Manchester United would have liked, with apparently Juventus as well as AC Milan both keen on him in the summer, but were beaten by United. But apparently United wasn't his first choice. Very frustrating situation if there is truth to it, because once again, United will find themselves short up front. And to be honest, I think a lot of people are now sort of saying that he probably wasn't the right type of player for United, in terms of United need an out-and-out goal scorer, and he's far more creative. But regardless of that, if we lose him in January, then we're back to being really short on strikers. So regardless of how many years, you got to stay, you got to start scoring goals. That's the reality. Because without him, then suddenly, we go back to Rasmus Højlund, who is great, but just Rasmus Højlund. And I do think that Zirkzee was a reasonable signing, but I still think we needed an out-and-out striker that scores goals. We need a 20, 30 goal striker. We needed to sign Harry Kane a year ago. That's what we needed to do. And if you don't sign Harry Kane, you've got to go and find the next big thing. Now, I think Rasmus Højlund is part of that. But we need to find someone who's got a little bit more experience. Tell you who I would take these days, Daniel Welbeck back on like a season-long loan. He would score lots of goals, I think, for United. But yeah, in terms of the situation, Zirkzee's currently signed until 2029. It's a pretty long-term contract. And there's an option to extend for a further year. So if he were to leave, he wouldn't be cheap. And I think that's the main thing. And I don't think I really see him potentially leave. So could we potentially see a loan to go sort of get some confidence? I'd be surprised because, who fills in for him during that loan? And, Louis Saha was speaking about, the strikers, for example, and the fact that he reckons that, something like Zirkzee really needs to stay in the environment so that he can work with Ruud van Nistelrooy, which is an interesting point, because we're talking about somebody else who's been speaking about Ruud van Nistelrooy as well. So Louis Saha said the following. He said, these players are in a bracket where they have lots of potential, but are not the finished product yet. He said, we know that Rasmus Højlund and Joshua Zirkzee can potentially score 25 goals in a season. They haven't done it yet. They're still learning. They have plenty of talent, but should be developing their skills, playing with Ruud van Nistelrooy rather than just being coached by him. And I think that's an interesting concept. The fact that there's no senior striker to sort of feed off of. You think about even in the last sort of 5-6 years, you had a Ronaldo there who you could learn from. You had a Cavani there you could learn from. You had a Zlatan Ibrahimovic you could learn from. You had Wayne Rooney before that. So this is probably the first time really that United haven't got a senior striker. And we've had injury issues. For example, Zlatan has injury issues. Obviously, Cavani had injury issues, and Anthony Martial has had plenty of injury issues. But we've always had them in and around the squad. They've always been there and an option to assist, for example, in mentoring youngsters, giving feedback, for example, being involved in team meetings and the likes. And it's very good to see that, for example, at least they've got Ruud van Nistelrooy, but they're being coached by, they're not necessarily going to play with them. So they'll never get to play with a Cavani, Zlatan, Rooney, Ronaldo on the pitch. And we've been crying out for a senior striker for ages, haven't we? And we've tried options like Anikalo, for example, coming in for just a short period of time. And that's why I was saying, maybe someone like Danny Welbeck it would be an interesting option. The sad thing is that it actually costs a reasonable bit of money if you were to get him because he is playing so well over at Brighton. But I mean, he's 33 years old and scoring goals. He is scoring goals. And I was always upset when he left. And I mean, this season, I think he's got 5 goals in 8 games. And I'll tell you what, I would take a striker right now, which would give us 5 goals in 8 games, and then our heartbeat. So that I do think we're just missing out. I mean, for example, you look at that photo over there, and Kobe Mainoo got Nacho, Rasmus Højlund, Joshua Zirkzee, 23 years old, then Euro 2019. You got the Ligt, who's young. There are so many talented youngsters in the United squad, but we're just really missing the world-class experienced players to bring them up. And every single time you listen to a podcast and interview of former United players, they speak about the environment which they grew up in. The environment such as, when Wayne Rooney comes in and he's got Roy Keane around him, and you've got players like Ruud van Nistelrooy, you've got Oliver Solskjaer in the squad, you've got your Beckhams around you, your Nevilles, your Paul Scholes, Ryan Giggs, you've got so much seniority around you, players who are at that level who can guide you and mentor you into what you are today. Andy Cole, Louis Saha, there's so many players, Dwight York, that it's just an environment that you can thrive in. And I think that is the biggest issue with Manchester United at the moment. You've got Marcus Rashford, who is one of your most senior players. Probably him and Bruno are the most senior attacking players. Rashford's 26 years old these days, so he's not young, but he's been in such a poor United environment for so many years that he's not quite, he's still himself trying to find out exactly how good he is. We're not talking about a Marcus Rashford who is completely settled in himself, scoring 20, 30 goals every single season. I still think he's got the potential to sort of have your most Salah type returns in a season, but he's not quite there yet. And he's under all this pressure, and now he's supposed to be sort of mentoring the next generation. Where is these senior players? Where are those sort of senior players, 28, 29, 30, 31 years old? Look how much Johnny Evans has added to United. And I'm not saying we have to then go and find a whole bunch of 35, 36 years old, but I do feel that we're really missing there's a big gap between your next generation and the current generation that should be producing these sort of players. And you've got quality players like, Bruno, for example, as mentioned, Rashford, and see players like Casemiro, former world-class players and players who've been out there and won things. But I just don't think there's enough. I think there's just a stunning lack of seniority and leadership, and we continue to talk about the lack of leadership. And I think it's very true. I think that we're so short of players who can add so much more than just what they see on the pitch, and players who might not have necessarily the legs left or the talent and stuff, but it's just very, very short on leadership. And until we solve that, I think that's going to be an issue for United for a long time to come. I don't know what the solutions are. I mean, I think De Ligt, for example, is a smart signing in terms of adding to the leadership group, but he's kind of the only one really that we've sort of signed in the last few years, which have really sort of bolstered any sort of leadership group. Maybe Casemiro to a point, but you go back to it. Had you gone after a Harry Kane, for example, he would have been club captain within a season, and he'd be sitting giving you 20, 30 goals. And where do you find the next sort of players like that? Your Rodri's for City, for example. Look at Odegaard, what he's done at Arsenal, and how important these players become in the short sort of space of time within their careers. And when are we going to see United sign a ready-made star that is not coming off a bad season of injury, for example, that's not getting older? When are we going to sign somebody in their prime who is at the top of their career? As JP saying in the comments, the perfect example should have gotten Rice. Somebody who's in the peak of his powers, shows up a position that was so needed as leadership to the group. And I've got a feeling that we've really been really poor about not signing personalities as well to a certain degree. It was interesting. I was listening to Phil Jones. He was on the podcast with Rio Ferdinand Presents, and he was speaking about the fact that when Sir Alex Ferguson wants to sign him, and he had the conversation with him, they didn't speak about football. He said he was asking about his appearance and his life and his family and his friends, and Sir Alex Ferguson was so clever about signing the right people, for example, not just the right players. And that's an interesting point. And I think that's something that's very underrated, something that United have potentially gotten wrong, is that you're going and signing good players, but are they the right type of people? And that's not to say they're bad people, but I'm just saying in terms of personalities, in terms of people that are going to add to the squad, add to the psyche of the squad. That's where we just not. I mean, when was the last time we signed a player and he's just coming and settled in and taken charge, for example, and the likes? You can maybe look at Bruno, but I mean, I the fact that Bruno's our club captain, phenomenal player, should not be a club captain, not compared to you look at your other club captains around the league, for example, in and around the world, and I mean, I just don't look at him in the same sort of way. I think that he's someone who is does demand more from players, which is fine. But I think the way he does it, you can't have a club captain who's getting yellow cards for dissent to the point where he gets banned during the Premier League because he's moaning at referees, for example. He's a player who I think when things start going bad, I think his head does tend to drop. And we need that Roy Keane type of character. We need those Wayne Rooneys. Your Vidic, your Ferdinand. Those players when the chips are down, they're up, they're running. They're not just shouting at people. It's easy to shout at people. That's for me. It's so much more to leadership and to leading a team than just bitching and moaning and shouting at players about not being good enough. It's in your actions, for example. Who is that player who is running more than anybody else when things are going badly? Who is that player that's tracking back, making a difference? And Marcus Rashford, I think, is a fantastic person, but he's not a big personality. I don't think Marcus Rashford's ever going to be a Manchester United captain. Diego Dalot, for example, I think has more of that kind of personality. I think that he is, he lives, breathes, dies Man United. He works really hard, and we need more players like that. I'm not saying that he's necessarily going to be next club captain, but he, for example, is standout in this side simply because he's got that passion, he's got that attitude, and we've got nobody else who has that. And until we do have anybody else that has that, then I think we're going to really struggle as a side. So, yeah, if Zirkzee wants to go, I don't particularly actually care. And that's sad, isn't it? But I just think that at the moment, you're looking at a player who has gotten a reasonable amount of chances, scored on debut, and we were, all very, very chuffed. But if he himself is sitting there deciding in himself and he's thinking that he wants to go, then piss off. Because that's a weak mentality. And we saw, for example, Anthony come out and talk about, have a shot debate, the whole, there's a plan for people and things will happen, etc. That whole statement he had over the weekend. And again, if that's your attitude, then piss off. We really don't need to sit there and convince people to play for Manchester United, convince people to stick around and buy into a project at Manchester United. So if Joshua Zirkzee wants to leave, then go. And we got to be a bit more ruthless about that. There's got to be a desperation to play for United. Now, speaking of a desperation to play for United, this is more kind of what you want to hear from people. And this is why I think somebody like a Kobe Mainu, Alejandro Garnacho, Ahmad have really done very well recently because of that desire to play for United. Now, future, hopefully, potential striker, Manchester United youngster Joe Huchel is taking inspiration from Ruud van Nistelrooy, apparently. He's currently on loan at Wigan Athletic. He played in the pre-season, and he spoke about what it was like to work with Ruud van Nistelrooy, as well as what his goal is for United. He said, I've really enjoyed working at Ruud. Having that figure to look up, it was good for me. And he said we did position specific on the pitch. They said a lot of the 8s running on, creating opportunities for the 9s with the crosses, different types of crosses coming into the box, where he wants the 9s to be. He did his own drills to help the forward players out. And I think that he's a player who he says he wants to be the next United striker. He was asked about his ambitions for being the Manchester number 9, and he said, I always back myself 100%, always 100% going for something. So that's kind of the attitude we want to see. Somebody who wants and dreams of playing for United. Not somebody who comes for 2 months and then decides, no, this is actually hard, and I don't like the criticism, and things aren't going well, and I think, maybe I'm just going to push for a loan. Similarly with Anthony. Now, I've just seen a story now that Anthony potentially is negotiating way back to Ajax. So I'm just trying to pull it up here, and then we'll talk about that. So this is the story. So Ajax apparently have discussed the possibility of bringing Anthony back from Manchester United on a permanent. However, they are unsure about the player's mindset after his struggles at Manchester United. This is the Telegraph that is reporting that out of Netherlands. Well, if you're not, from an United perspective, we probably need to see him go. We have to see him go. We spent far too much money on him for the returns that we've gotten, or the lack of returns that we've gotten. He's now sort of posting these cryptic messages on social media. And at the end of the day, if he's mentally he's gone and he's not training well, which I think it must be the case if he's not being given any sort of chance this season, then we've got to move him on. And it's another player that we're now going to lose money on because we brought him in for far too much. He hasn't delivered. And now we sort of don't know what to do with him. If he had come on 30, 40 million pounds, we wouldn't have been worrying about this. But to spend that ludicrous sum of money on him and then be in a situation is just another failure. Hopefully, Ajax do end up taking him back and we can kind of put this entire scenario behind us. Because we don't need more players like this. As I mentioned, we've got to get rid of personalities that don't fit into the change room. We've got to have people in the change room who want to play for United, desperate to play for United. That's like the only thing that keeps them up at night. That's what they aim to do every day, all day. Because if that's not the case, then we're not going to go anywhere. And we need to start going places very, very quickly because we are so far behind overall structurally from other teams that if we don't find other ways of catching up. And I do think that it is personality based. Yeah, I think that's something that Arteta's got right. He's brought in an Odegaard. He's brought in a Declan Rice, Saliba, for example, Gabriel. These are players who have really settled in and created a core leadership group and are adding to the mentality at Arsenal. And I think that's probably been their biggest lift. They've always had talented players, even under Emery and the likes. But personalities are so important. You've got to have a really good club captain, a proper strong leader at the front of the group. You've got to have someone who is demanding that of other players. I mean, people talk about the fact that Virgil van Dijk transformed Liverpool, and that was as much, mentality-wise than it was playing-wise. And that continues to be what's missing from United. I mean Wayne Rooney, and it was Paul Pogba, the Paul Pogba and Jesse Lingard incident when they were dancing in the change room. Apparently, that's when Rio Ferdinand messaged Wayne Rooney saying, how can you have this when we're sitting like 7th in the Premier League? And Wayne Rooney was just saying, this is just the new generation. This is how it is. You can't say anything. These players don't have quite the same mentality that they had years ago. And I'm not saying that we have to go back to the Roy Keane era and that's the only way you can possibly think, which is your way, highway. And, if you lose, you have to be miserable for the next few weeks and think. But there is that sense of, so what? And that was where previous teams were so good because if they lost a game or they drew a game, Phil Jones spoke about it. He said he played a game and he was marking Peter Crouch. And he said that he had done really, really well. He had taken him out the game. They were 1-0 up. And then the last minute, Peter Crouch got ahead of him and scored a last-minute equaliser. And Phil Jones walked in going, well, I thought I actually played reasonably well. Frustrating to concede the thing, but it's just a draw, whatever. And he said that the dressing room felt like they had just lost a final, that it was a complete disaster. And he said he had to learn so quickly that was the mentality. Anything less than a win was not good enough for United. Even a win with a bad performance was not good enough. And that was all about the standards and driving those standards. And he was a player who, I'm going to tell you what, I would take a Phil Jones tomorrow from a personality type of point of view. I mean, you remember, he sometimes had, he's very meme-worthy. But talk about somebody who would do absolutely everything and anything for his team. That the greatest piece of defending, I think, in history, that on-the-ground header. He was desperate. He would do anything. And that's the mentality we need back in the squad. We need more Phil Jones. We need more Villagers, Ferdinands. Not from a playing point of view. I think that we've got the talent from a playing point of view. But we need it from a mentality point of view. And that is what we've really got to look at with our transfers coming up. I feel we need to start signing a leadership group. We've got to try and sign a club captain. Now, have we potentially signed a club captain's list? Maybe we have. And if we have, then fantastic. But who's going to back them up? And you need them across. You need leaders across the group. You need a leader of defence. So that's De Ligt and Yeniol, for example, Martinez. Between the three of them, then I'm pretty happy with that. You got Dalot there, perfect. Luke Shaw, for example, he's not really a captain, but he'll be part of a leadership group because he's a senior player. Right, in your midfield, who is driving the leadership group? Eriksen, captain of this country, but I think that's from a mutual respect type of thing. I don't think he's necessarily a massive personality. He's he's more kind of just a lead by example type person, which is fine. But where are the personalities in the midfield? Where is your Declan Rice, your Roy Keane, your Portugal players who demand that? And then who's leading your front three? You look at Erling Haaland, look at the personality. Yeah, he's a weird character. Strange lad, and says strange thing. But look how much he demands of his players. He demands of other players. He gets annoyed at other players. He's working hard. He's grafting. Where are those players in United? And at the moment, you kind of feel your leadership group's kind of Bruno and Maguire when he plays there. And I mean, one thing you said about Maguire, he gets it done. He puts his head down. He works hard. He's a player that doesn't shy away from the spotlight. When we're playing badly, he doesn't go into a hole. He does try and get involved. Maybe not always as well as we'd like him to, but he does. And we need more players like that. The fact that Maguire came in was club captain within a season speaks volumes of the lack of leaders in United. And that's not to say he didn't deserve it, but nobody should be able to walk in and be a club captain within a year. And the fact that Harry Kane would, Declan Rice would, for example, speaks volumes of the United squad, because I'm not saying that they shouldn't be, in the leadership group quite quickly, but you should have a team which has got a settled club captain, a settled leadership group, and these guys are now additions to that. And maybe 2-3 years down the line, they then take on that role. But you can't be sitting in a situation where you could sign a player who's never been in a big club, bigger than Leicester, for example, in the top 6 club now, big as United, and you're club captain within a year. I mean, that's mental. I mean, I feel like the last captain we had, which you thought was really from a quality point of view, a leadership point of view, you could not dispute, was probably Wayne Rooney. And how many years is that now? And that's a major problem. So I think a lack of leadership is probably one of the biggest issues with this United side. And that's why I think when we do see, that's why we are losing games and the likes, because we don't have the ability to, or the players to be able to get up and go and find results. Now, Saturday was much better, but that is becoming an anomaly as opposed to an exception rather than the norm. And until that becomes the norm, we're going to continue struggling. But we're going to wrap it up there for today. So please do smash like the video if you're watching. Please do subscribe to the channel as well. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. And we'll see you guys all tonight at 7:30 for the